All right. Welcome, Joe. Hey, another podcast, right? Version 2. So we've kind of changed the scenery a little bit.
Yeah, I like it. It was a little too plain in the last conversation. So we now got some really cool visual interest here with Shotgun Eddie's corporate headquarters, world headquarters.
World headquarters, yeah.
Yeah,
So
love it.
neat stuff. So we've got Mr. John Wayne behind us, the Duke, and we got Blondie from the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And then from a '90s perspective, Tombstone. What a great movie. And what I like about the cowboy movies is they get a great cast of characters. And I probably need Young Guns up there because that was always one of my favorites too. Young Guns 1 and Young Guns 2. So from a newer generation of the cowboy movies.
You don't see too many Westerns anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that kids talk about or care about. And maybe there's no money in it. I don't know.
Well, it's from doing the research, what I've seen is just if you look at urban legends, the United States, our culture and our history, why people like the Cowboys because of those urban legends, right? It's really kind of the biggest stories that you can kind of glorify, that they didn't get into the mess of the politics of it. They got into the mess of just, hey, the struggle, the challenge, the frontier, the opportunity. That I think that's more or less the crux of a lot of those stories, right? It's just, hey, it's the United States, it's the opportunity, right? But yeah, with the generations changing, hey, the number one video games are always, some sort of, high action type games. So, what about you? Your favorite Western movie or actor or actress?
Clint Eastwood has always been, kind of a favorite over the years. I'm not sure I like his politics necessarily, but but his movies have always he's been around forever, and he's still doing stuff.
Yeah,
which is cool.
Yeah, he's been quite a character. And then I'm wearing my jersey today, so you got the Chief, which was my nickname in college. I played college football at John Carroll University in Cleveland, Ohio, and that was if you're on the sidelines, you would hear from the players, the coaches, parents, and our fans. But also it's kind of an homage to my grandparents. My one grandfather was a steel mill worker. My other grandfather was a coal miner. So having these patches on, this was on their gear every day, right? They had their name tag sewn on in a patch on their clothes. So that just, for me, it's kind of like, hey, I'm here to work. I'm here to serve my clients, riding shotgun. So
I love the connection to the past, kind of the shout out. And I think when you told me that story first time, I was trying to think through, how does that message really resonate? But I think when you tell that personal story, it really all comes together and makes sense for me.
I got lucky, right, in regards to just timing. I also like the horses because it's a unique opportunity, right? Every opportunity as a technology consultant, you're coming in, or even if it's sales and marketing, because I do sales and marketing gigs as well. Everybody's different, right? So I have to look at the problem, the challenge, and I have to think of, just like a football coach, right? Hey, what position does this person need to be in to be successful? Fortunately, played sports. Here in Charlotte, was the manager of a softball team, player coach. So kind of an homage back to the old school baseball days. Right. But it's like baseball, right? You get to know who can play that position and who can do it well. And your home run hitter shouldn't be at the top of the lineup trying to just get a base hit and get on base. You're kind of wasting their time and wasting. But again, what position are they good at? But you're in leadership. I'm sure it's the same way with IT. Where do you kind of see that baseball or sports analogy? Because I know you played college basketball, right?
Yeah. D1 basketball at Northern Illinois University. Yeah, way back, long time ago. Yeah, there's so many parallels to sports and leadership. It's really how you conduct yourself. Kind of what your personal integrity is all about, and how do you treat people? Are you a good team player? That sort of thing. It's sort of a natural thing, and it fits. I think there's forever you see leadership gurus talking about sports analogies, because I think it's such a natural thing.
It is, and I mean, it keeps you out of trouble. But I like to say business is my sport, right? So it keeps it fresh, keeps things going. So as podcast 2 rolls out, what's our lineup for today? What do you want to talk about?
I think I've had a lot of conversations with IT leaders and business leaders across the globe recently, and business and technology. sort of the strategy of the business and what drives the strategy and how does technology fit into it. Seems like a common conversation. That's one topic.
Let's unpack that real quick. So let's look at it from the enterprise, the big ones, the globals, the large organizations. What does that mean? Because you're in a lot of leadership and CIO and CTO and CDO type of environments, and you'll typically see those roles in the larger organization. So what's trending at the enterprise level?
Well, I think trying to figure out company strategy, like what is the company about, what's its purpose. How is it trying to drive market share, retain customers? Those are always age-old common things, no matter what happens in the marketplace. I think the challenge comes in is, where do you fit into where's technology fit into that picture? And if it's an afterthought, it's usually less effective, in my view. And I'm certain you see that too, Mike, in your business.
Yeah, the enterprise, the change has been that 1990s, that tech team's been on board for the last 20 years, right? They've done a great job. It's been insurmountable. But how do you change? It's hard because the teammates that are on the team, they're really good at what they do. If you had to rehire them, you probably have to hire 4 or 5 people, right? Because they're so good. But how do you take it to the next level, right? Because there's a lot of different niche products, niche services. But also what we're seeing is when you start to unravel that as a CIO or a CTO, when they get into these new organizations and they're new, it's like they want to do one thing, but however, it might domino 20 different applications or 30 different applications. And what happens is they almost do nothing and they stay with the status quo just because it costs a lot of time, it costs a lot of money. And is it, there's a saying out there, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the juice worth the squeeze? And what I've seen too is some are, maybe they're smart. They're so conservative. They haven't made some of those decisions because they might lose their job, right? Because there's just so many unknowns and you have to have a super high level of trust with your team to make those type of decisions. But then there's the other side of folks where we sit and we know where technology is going. It's like, if you don't start doing these things, it's just going to ball up, and then how are you ever going to move? So it's a tough decision.
It is tough, and I think what's also difficult in this context is taking sort of a long-term view. We are, as an industry, and a lot of the businesses that I interact with, we tend to be, what are the results next year, next quarter, instead of let's look out 2-3 years, which sometimes is difficult to do. And I think your comments are spot on. I think there's a lot of IT leaders that I've worked with in the past that are super comfortable with the roles, and anything that might disrupt those roles makes them, sort of recoil from, exploring any kind of change.
Yeah.
And there's as long as I've been at this, I still see some significant opportunities for improvement around the idea that, when companies are working on strategy, they need to integrate and incorporate. I call it converge IT and business. So They need to be done in context, because IT is just a tool at the end of the day. And if it's not connected to the company's strategy in some meaningful way, then, you're not going to get the kind of results you'd hope to. Then to me, Mike, that's where I see a lot of these positions that are popping up. Chief digital officer, chief data officer. They're kind of, in a way, a reflexive reaction. I think we talked about this in the last podcast, where, C-suite execs are not satisfied with the results they're getting out of IT. And so they're looking for something different. And these new positions give them some sort of hope. So I see that happening too. And I think IT's got to evolve just as well as the C-suite. They have to transform their own thinking around technology and strategy.
So let's talk about the medium-sized business. So you're with a medium-sized business is what I would declare, right? You're not a small business.
Right.
Where is that at the medium-sized business? It seems like to me that'd be a really fun space to be, because you don't have a lot of the big silos and the corporate agenda and the Wall Street warfare that goes on at the top level, right? What's happening in medium business?
A lot of the same things are happening, obviously different scale. It is sometimes easier to make things happen inside smaller companies. There's less bureaucracy. There's just fewer people, fewer layers. But the problems are very similar. I think what's really interesting in the world that I've lived in you know, 15 years ago, if you looked inside the IT organization, it was all the functions were staffed internally.
Yeah.
So, you know, every skill set, you had somebody on board that had that skill set. With the maturation of the cloud and platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, now I have more choices. And when I start moving up from, say, infrastructure to platform to software as a service, my dependency on FTEs inside the firm tend to shrink. And what's interesting is it's given rise to vendor partnerships, you know, in your business. And this is one of the things I like about what you guys do is you're really trying to be a broker, trying to find that right partner. And when you're working with IT leaders, Mike, how do you sort of deal with that sort of thing when they're sort of resistant to, you know, outsourcing, you know, looking for a partner to help them with those sorts of things?
It's a great challenge, right? Because it comes down to trust, right? So typically, you know, I'm getting in there because there's some sort of pain going on, and maybe an existing vendor hasn't been able to support that. Maybe I've had a relationship with them in the past, but you really kind of have to start with one project. It's typically not like, hey, I'm going to do 20 different things. However, the challenge that I'm seeing is people, the IT teams are overtasked. They're understaffed. And budgets really aren't they're not really increasing, so to speak. And we'll love to talk more about cyber with that, right? Sure. Because we certainly know that that's where it's going. So for instance, I've got a client right now that 8 to 10 mergers over the last couple of years, and nobody really kind of kept their eye on, hey, what do we have to do with all these systems? Now they've got independent business units out in the United States that are still kind of doing things the old way, and they're using a software system, an ERP that's really kind of 20 years old, and it's not really cloud ready. And the problem is they've customized it so much. I kind of look at if you went down to Cuba, hey, those cars were great in the 50s and 60s, and they go, well, but you know, the Cuban government kept them from fixing those cars. That's what their ERP system is. Like, hey, yeah, it's a great car from 20, 30 years ago, and they've repaired it millions of times and customized it, but it will not last on the road. There's no way you're going to scale. And this organization wants to double and triple over the next couple of years. So ERP is really, and it's hard, right? We were in a meeting yesterday, and it's a large global company, and they said, you know, ERP is probably the last thing that you would ever want to touch because it's just so painful. Once you're in, you're kind of married to it. But yeah, it goes back to just find one project. Let's get it done. Let's do it well, and just get it done on time.
Yeah, and there I think that touches back on that issue of taking a longer term view, because the idea about, you know, if I know one company that has 7 or 8 different ERP systems, and it's trying to create a brand image that is unified across the entire marketplace. And that's hard to do when you have different delivery systems that are driven by the uniqueness of each of those ERPs. You've got cybersecurity issues. You mentioned that a minute ago. All of that becomes more complicated. And sometimes executives don't really see that pain. It's like that, you know, the image of a duck. The duck looks calm above the water, and underneath those little, you know, feet are going like crazy. They're not called feet though, Mike, are they? No. I don't know what they're called. But I think that's a really good point you bring up, because you know, I think, you know, in the world we live in too, and I have a coaching customer that I was talking to this morning, and they had their first cybersecurity proposal ever. And one of the things I was advising them on is, if you want to get a competitive bid, first of all, I think that's a phenomenal idea. But secondly, if you're going to get a competitive bid, find a company that's similar, where they're niche, they're a niche player. They dedicate their teams largely to cybersecurity. You can get a lot of people who say they do cybersecurity, and you know, they'll do a network, they'll do project management, they'll do scaled agile framework, they'll do everything. But I think it's in this world, it's especially on the cyber front, it's really important to get a specialty firm in there. And then related to that, Mike, an interesting conversation. You know, they're looking at their budget and they see cyber as an IT expense, and I told them, in my view, that's one area where I might have a difference of opinion, in that cyber really should be a corporate expense, just like they have, you know, insurance for the company. You should really have a cyber expense for the company as well. So I think that's an evolutionary thing that I think IT has to get a little bit more savvy around.
Well, you hit it right in the head. So I was with an entrepreneur yesterday, had lunch with them, And, the whole thing that they're talking about is like, look, the economy is doing really well. Now's my time to invest. So they're investing. They invested in a new vehicle. It wasn't brand new off the lot. It had, several thousand miles on it. But that's how they look at it. Like, look, I better invest now into my business, because if the economy changes, I'm not going to have money. I'm not going to have budget. So from an IT perspective, I want to be around the folks who are investing right now in that budget. And going back to cyber, it's a different conversation, right? Yeah. It's risk, but how do you get those folks, in the medium-sized business or small-sized business, because it's expensive. It's really expensive, yeah. but it's necessary. I see the cyber folks are typically, obviously, they're usually compliant, right? They're in healthcare, finance, they have PCI compliance because they're in credit cards. However, the folks that aren't in it, they don't know. And how do you check? It's just, it's kind of sad. And I was listening to, one of the political things that are going, the politics that are going, I won't name the person's name, but really what they said is, and, whether you like their politics on whether side they're on, they really kind of commented on, what China's doing. And China, they felt that, the United States really hasn't focused on China. You look at Huawei, and IT, right? They've got all their gear in the United States. Well, they're listening to everything that we do. Right. They're not stealing our bank accounts. They want to know what we're doing so they can make the right move to buy products, buy services. I've got somebody very, very close to our family who they're in manufacturing. They'll go overseas and they'll call up their engineer and say, hey, where was that defect in that one product, right? And they'll go over and like, okay, go that chair leg, and boom, yep. Hey, we got a knockoff here. So they'll steal the design, but they're not as savvy to know that, hey, that there's a problem there. Yeah. So cybersecurity, people just don't understand, like, you're getting your stuff. Somebody can steal your business like this, and you just don't even know.
Unfortunately, there's too many real stories about small to medium-sized companies who had cyber attacks, and it's actually sunk them. And sometimes when I'm talking to IT leaders who are trying to get a cybersecurity program implemented, and they're trying to convince the management team to spend money on something they've never spent money on, which is really difficult to do. But it's kind of pay me now, pay me later. The fact that you haven't spent money on it doesn't mean you shouldn't spend money on it, and that's a really hard conversation to have. I don't know if you deal with this all day long.
So what I do is I'll come in and we do assessments, right? Since we're we have a lot of different technologies that we have specialists in, we can come in and kind of silo those businesses and figure out, okay, what savings do we have in this category? What savings do we have in this category? What savings do we have in this category? Typically it's, crawl, walk, run. Sometimes we can look at all of them, but I was working with a CIO, last year we saved them, 15 grand, and they used that to reinvest into the business. It wasn't all cyber, it was other opportunities. And then here recently, worked with a new director of IT. So the director of IT came in, and guess what? For the last 5 years, they were telling us, no, we're good. No, we're good. They were doing it on their own. Guess how much we saved them? It's just a little company, right? About 500 employees, just on one little project. 60,000.
60,000. Nice.
On one little thing that they used to source, they got out of it, and then they brought it back. They brought it back in house and said, "Hey, what do you think?" And we're saving them $5,000 a month. So
that's real money.
And it's mobile. So it's nothing really. It's things that you pay that bill every month. You think it's good, and then it unravels, and it's just like. But it took the new IT person to come in there to do that. So that's kind of the frustrating thing of. Some things like, look, I know I can, maybe I can help you out. But that dynamic, that ambitious, IT executive that wants to invest in the business, you just got to let them run, right? They can really change it, right?
Absolutely. I think, vendor partnerships has taken on a whole new meaning. We talked about this earlier in the podcast, but I think forward-thinking IT leaders really start to understand that finding that right partner and having them help you with, I'll call it the dial tone services of the company, gives you an opportunity as a leader to focus on the company strategy and making sure that you're doing those things that are actually helping driving the company forward. So to me, it just makes sense. Too many CIOs are still, we talked about this, Mike, they're too comfortable with, their current situation. They don't want to rock the boat or change it. They're happy where they're at. Unfortunately, the world isn't going to wait. I think they'll get caught up in that at some point down the road.
Yeah, you've got to challenge yourself and take it to the next level. So one of the other things that we want to talk about was digital transformation. What are some of the business drivers that you're seeing? That's a big word, right? And a lot of the big, like the Gartners and the Forresters, and the Googles and all the, people in technology, they like to use these big words, right? And say, slap it on everything, so you can't get overused. But what's from your standpoint as a CIO, what's that business driver from digital transformation?
Yeah, it almost feels like an overused phrase to me now. It almost has a meaningless connotation for me. But generally, when I hear it, it's companies are struggling with the fast-paced change of technology. Upstarts coming from seemingly nowhere to fall into, we've used many examples of movie theaters in the past would never have anticipated Netflix, for example, or Uber and taxi cabs. And that's happening on many levels. Technology has brought a lot of new entrants. And I think digital transformation for a lot of companies is sort of a reflexive reaction to that phenomenon, where they're looking for ways to make sure that they don't get caught up and they're not the next buggy whip, that they're keeping pace. But to me, Mike, it's more important that the company think that strategy through and then integrate technology solutions into it appropriately. It's not the reverse. So it's more of a natural conversation. So when I think about digital transformation, it has to start with the way business leaders think about technology and think about how to leverage it. You and I were talking before the podcast about data, and you said something that really resonated with me around how to, especially small and medium-sized companies, pull data out of their environment and use it and leverage it. I don't know if you have some examples to talk about there, but I think that's a part of I think that what might fit into this digital transformation conversation.
Yeah. So at the large level, the global. So I've got a client that's one of the largest e-retailers in the world, and what they're doing is they're very digital savvy, right? They want to know everything that's going on in their organization. The challenge they have is it's e-commerce, it's retail. What happens with returns, right? And that's a big challenge for B2C type companies. Is not only is the return, but it's the return experience. Your customer's already upset, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of that thing didn't fit right, didn't look right. What's going on? But how do you keep them happy so they buy from you again? Because how long it took you to get to that point of that relationship where they actually bought from you and to buy from you again is real money. So it's kind of neat where you've got all these different pockets now, and there's a couple of vendors out there that are doing these like AI. You use AI, but I use that generously. It's really business intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're doing is they're stacking this one dashboard that taps into all of your dashboards. And now you can see kind of, green, yellow, red of what your business is really doing well and what you're not. So as a leader, you can jump into that dashboard and say, oh, wow, why are our returns taking 30 days to get back to us or get back or restock, right? Mm-hmm. So you can really get a pulse of the business at a large retail. A lot of these retailers are going through that. But look at the business from a small business, a gig economy where we're at, is you better have data. So I invest in tools that give me data as I'm talking to my clients and talking to prospects, that I know exactly if they're interested or not, because that's all I want to talk about. I want to talk about what Joe's interested in. If I'm talking about what you're not interested in, I'm wasting your time, wasting my time. What about you? What are you seeing as you're rolling out your business? Is there any cool tools that you're seeing that give you data?
That's a great question. I've had an opportunity over the past couple of years to work with some really innovative companies on the data side. One is a company out of Atlanta. I'll give them a shout out here, but Answer Rocket,
cool.
a really interesting small firm that helped us when I was at Snap AV get sort of a data warehouse of actually solution-based data analytics capability, natural language-based capability in the hands of our product management team.
Really?
And then we did it much more, I would say it was an unorthodox implementation. We didn't go through the full, operational data store, moving to a normalized data structure and, sort of that traditional methodology that takes quite a bit longer. Yeah. This program was a lot more short-term. months, maybe just a few weeks to months.
Yeah.
And we got it up and running, and it's been widely used by that team very successfully. So you don't have to spend, millions of dollars on these sorts of things. I think the marketplace is evolving, and there's lots of really interesting technologies out there. And there's other companies here locally, Stratified, and then our friends down the road, I forget their name off the top of my head right now, but there's a lot of companies emerging in the marketplace that are helping to solve some of those problems.
Yeah, one thing that I've looked at is I want to see who integrates within the supply chain, because every business is a supply chain. We talked about it, like supply chain for IT used to be internal. You had to hire internally because you didn't have the product. You had to build everything internally, right? You had to build the apps, you had to build all that custom.
Yeah.
Today, those tools are readily available on the market. They can do it better, faster, cheaper. However, you just have to have the people that know how to tie those in. So what I've looked at is when I pick a particular technology, I want to make sure it has native organic sync into the tools that I use. If it doesn't, I have to really think hard of why I'm going to choose that, because it's going to interrupt my workflows.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think if you have to manually integrate data every day or once a week, the value of that data becomes a lot less impactful. And so that natural integration, that automatic integration, makes those business insights surface more quickly, and they're more real. You mentioned gig economy. I think that's an interesting concept, because I think there's a lot of individuals out there now that are popping up in our local market, where they're all out trying to hang out their own shingle and selling their services. And you've seen a lot of that too, Mike. And what are your thoughts around individuals that are now sort of finding themselves in a situation where they're having to go out and hang out their own consulting shingle?
I think it kind of rolls back to our conversation earlier, is what are you really good at? What are you expert at? What is so muscle memory that you can do it in your sleep all day, every day, and you have to stick with that. The challenge with that, we had it made this in our first podcast, is it goes back to kind of like the lemonade stand, right? It's like, hey, I know I'm really good at selling lemonade, but I'm not going to make it just selling lemonade, right? We don't see just one person lemonade stands out in the world, right? There's a reason for it. So how do you start selling lemonade, but then you need to have probably 2 other products, right? Just to make sure that you're going after that target. So if they're thirsty, you're probably gonna have lemonade and Gatorade and water, right? So it's like, how are you gonna capture that, get enough revenue? And here's the other thing you have to think about too, is as you add more revenue, in a gig economy, you have to be really careful of how much you're gonna pay yourself, because you also need to pay for employees. Because if you start doing it all yourself, you're never going to grow. We talked about that earlier, right? Yeah. As some business owner struggles. Again, I struggle too, right? I am no way and have a perfect business or anything perfect. But lessons learned is, as you grow your business, you better be thinking about that revenue and how you're going to add people or add the application or invest into that tool that's going to take your business to automation. Otherwise, you're toast.
I think I see in the markets that we travel in, and when I was in Minneapolis, I saw the same thing, especially for owner-operated companies, small businesses. Owners are often reluctant to let go. And the real successful ones do that, and they bring in professional managers, and they take over aspects of the business, and they're allowing them to help them get even bigger, if that's a goal. Yeah. And where I see companies really struggle is when that owner is really clamping down on everything, and they still actually do the work, and so you can't scale that, and I think that's a big challenge that people have. I think you hit on something there too, Mike, and I had good advice from a friend of mine who is in marketing at a small company, and they said, if you try to go to market with 20 different things on your website, for example, you're going to lose people. Tell them about the 3 things you do that you really love to do, and now you can spin off those 3 things into other, as you point out, different sort of beverages. But I think it's really important for you to sit down and think about what things do you like to do. Those tend to be the things you do really well, and just kind of limit it and don't overwhelm people with, a spray of different things that you offer up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the old adage. I've been in sales for a long time, but folks will tell you, hey, in the beginning, you start with your friends and family, and then you grow the business from there. But, for me, what I really like about being an entrepreneur too is being able to launch new products based on based on client success and what they really want, right? So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you have to have a testing ground too for new products of what's really going to be there. There's a popular model out there in the SaaS world for people building software is an MVP, which stands for minimal viable product. Get your minimal viable product out there, and then you can start adding. I've been with some companies and some entrepreneurs who are super talented, super smart, have plenty of money, have great businesses, but they struggle too, right? The struggle is where is that minimal viable product that I can get traction, but then I don't want to over-engineer it and hire so many people that now I'm stuck. Because what happens is your client might say, oh, I want this one feature, I want this other feature. Well, that's the next level, right? That's where you almost, if you're in a software business, that's your custom shop. So we're working with an entrepreneur right now. It's launching a really, really, really cool product. It's really kind of Slack for cybersecurity. It's off the grid, total, zero trust. And same thing as like, they feel like they've got it to a minimal viable product, that it's got everything that you would need right now. Yes, there are large organizations that are asking, hey, we want this, we want this. Well, guess what? That goes to Jesse James, who's going to custom ride that chopper for you, right? So you got to have your custom person to do that. So from your perspective, you're on the buying side, right? You bought that. How do you look at a minimal viable product, but then you're like, you know what? They don't have this. They don't have that. Where is that?
Well, that's where you really got to understand what problem you're solving.
Yeah.
And, along with MVP, you have the flip side of that is when you get that product out there, the people that build those solutions should be probing, sensing, and responding to that product, because they have an idea in their mind as to what they think the market might buy, and that's the whole point of MVP, is to see, is that something that is usable or practical. I think in that context, I am not afraid to pick up and leverage vendors. Like Answer Rocket was very new in their evolution when we were one of their first customers, and I wasn't afraid of it because they had a solution that met 90% of the needs that we had in our business. And sometimes you get into the featureitis curve, when you have more features than you could possibly use, where you go from satisfied to where'd that feature go, and now I'm on the downside of satisfaction because I can't find what I used to be able to find very easily.
And the vendor you find that might have everything, they might not even be good at it, right? That product might not even be that good.
Yeah.
So I heard an entrepreneur, because this is how I geek out, but they said you have to find somebody who would score a B, and you have to be okay with that, because nobody's gonna do it as good as you are, right? So you have to be as good as finding that B. If you find a talented person, that's A, or that product. But like you said, right, 90%, that's depending on what grading scale you're in. That's not my kids with a 10-point grading scale, so they have a couple points there more than what I did growing up. But that's pretty close, right? You can always add to it and figure. But you might buy that app too, and it might not be work. Why would you tie everything all the way in and be like, oh, how am I going to untie this too, right?
Right.
So,
well, that's the thing too. If that platform hadn't worked out, it wouldn't have cost us an arm and a leg to exit. So that much more quickly too in the MVP world.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
Good stuff.
So we talked gig economy, brand, being a specialist, and then we talked about cyber. So anything else you want to chat about or promote?
No, just it's a fun market out there, Mike, and I've had great conversations with people. I think people are hungry for help and services, the kinds that we offer in the marketplace. So I'd encourage everyone to reach out to yourself or myself and engage us. We're hungry to help.
Awesome. And for those folks I'll plug the cybersecurity chat platform. So if you go to the website, cybersecuritychat.guru, Guru. Again, that's cybersecurity chat, CHAT.guru. I can set up a meeting and talk to you and do a demo for you, show you that it's really cool. If you know Slack, there's the cool thing is this is zero trust, and there's a lot of 3-letter organizations that are looking at this, military, government. So there is a high interest on this app. So if you have super sensitive, critical documentation that you're sharing either internally with your own organization, or you might have to share it with a third party, a lawyer, whomever, how do you know that that's happening? If you've already been compromised in a cyber, you're not going to be able to send that via email because the bad guys, that actor is seeing it. And how are you going to do that? This is tremendous. It's the neatest tool I've seen. So that's the cool thing about being in this space too, is you get to really see some neat things and you get to meet some neat people.
You showed me a demo of that last week, and I was pretty impressed with it. And I think it's something that, if you've got highly sensitive information you're dealing with, super confidential information, it is absolutely something you should take a look at.
Awesome. And then also, Joe, if you need want to talk with him, he's got his book, CIOmentor.com. But obviously, we'd love to hear more from you. Please subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then also please like us and put in comments. We want to hear what you guys say. And if there's anything that you want to hear, any topics from Joe or from me, we'd love to hear more feedback from you. So we wish you guys a happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And have a great day.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Take care.